Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I'm so excited to grow in the radical art of standing in what God says about you with you today. The show is a place where we pour into the sense of who God is, who we are, and how we can live more in the freedom that He has for us every single day. Hello, and welcome to the Authentic Uprising podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I am happy to be spending this time with you today. I am so excited for us to talk more about how anxiety fits into the puzzle in light of our identity as beloved children of God. And that's what we're always looking at, really. What is it that God wants to speak into us in all of these situations that we face in our lives? And how do we interpret and really interact with these things we struggle with in light of how we know God created us? And so to have this conversation with me today, I have Whitney Haarh, who is going to be talking with us about how she has navigated this in her own life. And also she has crowdsourced some really wonderful advice that she's going to share with us about just managing anxiety in your everyday Christian life. So thank you, Whitney, so much for being here with me today.
Yes, I'm so excited to join you. It's going to be so fun.
So go ahead and start by just telling us a little bit about you and where you're at in life. And really, you can kind of wrap up with where anxiety has showed up in your life so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Whitney. I have experienced tons of changes of life in the last year. So I am married, expecting my first baby in April of 2023, which is just crazy. I'm so excited. Recent college graduate. So navigating that. I'm an entrepreneur. I do design work as I have a graphic design degree. And then I also run a Catholic podcast and shop called Abundantly Yours. And so kind of just letting the Lord do his thing in this season. Like I said, in the last 2022 was a lot. I finished my last semester of school living actually in my college town. And then I moved home with my parents. That was move number one. And then my husband and I got married 2 months later. So then move again, and then the whole transition of marriage, right? Like figuring out how to live with a man. And then we found out we're expecting our first baby. And then we ended up moving again, and I'm finishing my last semester of school. And so just a lot happened last year, and they were all such beautiful and good things, but it also brought about so much change and so much, things that I'm like, okay, Lord, like what's happening? What are you doing? And so I think a lot of our anxiety comes with fear of the unknown. And that's at least what I've experienced is when I get to this place of like, I have no idea what's happening. I just like start to have those spiraling thoughts and I grip for control. Like I take the Lord and I just say, I got this. Like, I just get tight and tense and I'm like, okay, I got to take a deep breath. And that's where I struggle with anxiety the most is when, I don't know what's coming next. So with a business, right? That's in entrepreneurship, running a business, I'm like, okay, Lord, this is what I desire, but is this what you want? And I don't know what the next thing in business, I don't know if I'm ever going to hit that certain goal that I want, or, and that's kind of with anything in life, stepping into motherhood and having no idea what to expect. I can either choose to like freak out and choose to just, kind of cripple into those thoughts that the enemy gets us to believe, or I have this option to, let the Lord do his thing. Right. And so as I kind of navigated all this change and the anxiety that came with it, instead of choosing to freak out, like I have had my moments, okay, I'm human, I'm not perfect. But I had this option of choosing the Lord and choosing freedom with him in the day-to-day life, instead of worrying about what's coming next week, what's coming tomorrow. And in high school 3 years ago, I was like the type A planner, planned everything out, yeah, I was that girl. And now I'm to the person that's like, someone asked me what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure that out tomorrow morning. And it's hard to do that, but it comes with a lot of surrender. So I kind of guess that's where I've kind of experienced anxiety, is with just that fear of the unknown. And through that, I've learned a lot of, okay, we have the two choices, right? To just go down that path, or to just choose Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's a really interesting conversation to have, because I think there's a lot of people that want to think they are whatever, authentically choose Jesus, but still struggle with like the physical manifestations, or just kind of that like emotional physical side of anxiety, where there's kind of a hypothetical spiritual act of like, okay, I'm going to give this to Jesus, but then there's also like, but I'm still really tense. So you talked about that like tightness in your body and things like that. And I think that that's really interesting to talk about. Should we expect that to go away, or is that always going to be a piece of the puzzle, or like, where do we interact with that? And I know for myself, that's kind of what is lingering, is that as I've grown and, you know, really didn't start focusing on things like this until I was much older than you. So good for you. But I have been really, emphasizing putting things in the Lord's hands and things like that. But so often I find that I still have like the physical feeling, like, especially about, I'm going to say less about things like you're talking about, like moving and change, and more like a customer is angry, or there's like a situation where something is coming at me that feels like it is very anxiety inducing, and trying to manage that in the physical with the spiritual acts. And so I'm just interested if you know what I'm talking about, first of all, and if you've experienced something like this, and if you have methods, or we talked before you got on the podcast about people sharing with you really helpful strategies for dealing with anxiety. If there's anything in that kind of speaks to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I definitely relate to that, like, okay, like anxiety. And I think, yeah, we tense up, right? Like our heart rate rises, our brain just starts to like spiral. We're like, sometimes we just get into this like freak out mode, right? Like I experience it. We're all human. And so what's helped me the most is getting rid of kind of worldly things that are near me. So my phone, that's when it gets the worst, is when I'm on my phone, because I can see I'm scrolling through everyone else's social media, right? That's what what social media is. And so I've learned to put my phone down, put it on do not disturb. That's the first thing I do, because that's typically does not do anything for me when I'm anxious. I just need to like chill and take a deep breath. And I think for me, what helps me a lot is I go sit in our recliner and I put my feet up and then I just sit and process it with God. And so one of the girls, I didn't write hers down, but I know what she said. She's like, I give myself 20 minutes to feel these thoughts. She's like, if it's anger, if it's anxiety, if it's whatever it is, she's like, I set a timer for 20 minutes, let myself feel those feelings. And after that, I take it to the Lord and I say, this does not have power over my life, right? He does, like, these thoughts don't have power over me. You do. And you are truth, beauty, and goodness. That's who God is. And so even for me, just coming back to, well, what is this that I'm believing? What am I struggling with? Maybe I'm anxious about where my next orders are coming with my shop, or maybe I'm anxious about something that the Lord is calling me to do that I'm so nervous to do, but I know it's what he's calling me to do. And so coming back to the truth of who I am, who I was created to be as a daughter. Because I think for me, anxiety spirals a lot with those enemies, the lies, right? And so just coming back to the truth of who am I? And so one of my friends, Maya, she said a couple different things. So she's like, what am I afraid of? So identifying this, what is it that's causing me this feeling, and get down to the root of why you're feeling that way. get out the journal and write it down, because you're going to have thoughts going everywhere. And so just writing that down and seeing why you're feeling that way. What is the cause of it? And then after that, ask yourself this. This is what she said. And this is one of my favorite things. It says, does Jesus love you? Yes, he loves you. Would he ever turn away from you? Absolutely not. Therefore, the only person making you feel fear is Satan, because Jesus will take care of you. And I was like, girl, I needed that. I needed that in that moment of just like, I asked for this advice when I was in a moment of just anxiety and feeling like the world was going to end and everything was just falling apart. And I'm like, wait, coming back to the truth is so powerful. And so that's, I guess, what's helped me a lot physically, is just taking a deep breath and really identifying what it is that's causing this feeling. So I guess that's what I got.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's been one of the strategies that's been most helpful for me, is like a lot of times as Christians, there's this, especially I think so interestingly, when we only know who we are and our identity, like intellectually, when it's something where it's like, I know that God loves me, or I know that I'm a child of God, but that is very much like a head knowing only. And I haven't experienced this in a way that I've connected tangibly with my emotional, heart-based experience. Because I think that, like everything, so much of it is about, how do I live in what is real versus what is perceived? And so that's exactly what you're talking about, is where we have this situation where it's like perceived that I'm in danger, perceived that there's something that's going to come at me and be able to overwhelm me. When in reality, the situation is that if I do place myself in this place of surrender to God, then that fear just is irrational. It's not based on the real reality of the situation. And so I love what you said, when you ask yourself those questions, it's basically, I'm going to actively tell myself the truth. And I think that that's something, we see that in Second Kings when David in Second Kings says, when there's a huge loss in battle, that talks about David consoling himself with what he knows to be true. And not that we don't go to prayer with that, but we also don't like rely on consolation in prayer, like the voice of God being like, you're okay, though he can and will do that and does do that sometimes. I think a lot of times, especially as we mature as Christians, he's like, no, you know that you're okay. Like, you tell yourself that you're okay. I think about my children learning to ride their bikes, and, the first couple of times that they fall, it's just this cataclysmic event. But then as time goes on, my husband and I have less like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And it's more like, no, you're fine. Like, you know that you are okay. Let's keep this growth going that opens you up to being able to do things at a level that you weren't able to do things before. And so I think that is such a valuable practice. And obviously that's what at Pink Salt, right? That's kind of like what our products are supposed to help you do, is be these touchstones of like, how do you tell yourself the truth in the moment? And so I'm obviously really passionate about that. But I think that there's also so much judgment that we will attach to ourselves in just like even feeling those feelings at all. Like you were talking about the woman saying, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes. It's really hard for us to be uncomfortable a lot of the time, and to like accept that that's something that like that multiple things can be true at one time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we attach anxiety to our identity of, especially, if you are someone who struggles with anxiety a lot, like coming back to who we are as a daughter of God, right? Of who he says that we are, who am I? Pray with that question. That is such a powerful question to come back and ask the Lord of, who am I? Like when you introduce yourself, what do you say? At the beginning of the episode, I didn't probably do the best introducing myself, right? But kind of like praying with that, like, Lord, who do you say that I am? What identifies me? And I think so much of the time society puts so much pressure on us in the sense of your identity comes in your grades. If you're in college, like you have to have a 4.0, or your identity comes in your work. Like that's so false. And I think we get so wrapped up in serving these quote unquote worldly identities that we become a slave to ourselves. Like I become, back when I was finishing my last semester of school, I was becoming a slave to this design work that I had to do in these projects because I felt that they were controlling me. And like that was the first priority in my life. So I got up and first thing in the morning, I would start that and not even pray first. Right. And so really coming back to the root of who we are and praying with that every day and reminding ourselves. I was just thinking of this the other day. So I babysit my nephew until my baby arrives. And so I've been watching him a few days a week. And I was also talking to a friend on Instagram about how her baby loves the mirror, like looking in the mirror at herself. And I was like, okay, like these little infants, her baby's 2 months old, my nephew is 4 months old. Look in the mirror and they just giggle and laugh at themselves. They don't look at themselves and say, oh, you're ugly, I don't like you. They laugh and giggle, and babies vomit and puke and they're just messy, right? And so they look in the mirror. They don't care. They don't care about these things that are happening. They just look and they're so happy looking at themselves in the mirror. And I'm like, why don't we do that as grown adults? Why can't we look in the mirror, especially as women, and say, you are beautiful, you are loved, and you are so known by the Father? But instead we say, oh my gosh, you have a pimple, I don't look skinny enough today, my hair is crazy. Like, why do we do that to ourselves? Because that's just the first trigger to letting the Satan into our lives. And so coming back to, who am I? I think that's just such a huge part of this, at least for me, with anxiety, of not letting something else identify me, because that's when I start to feel those feelings of, who am I? Who am I? It's just as easy as that. I mean, it's not easy, but that's, a question we have to pray with, right? And ask the Lord. And if you struggle with that, put the pressure on Jesus to tell you who you are. He loves you. He wants to hear from you and he wants to fill your heart. And if you're really struggling with that, say, Lord, I don't know who I am. I'm going to pray and demand for an answer from you until I hear it, until I know that, because he doesn't want us to know anything else but truth, beauty, and goodness. And so, yeah, I just got fired up, but we have to know who we are as daughters of the Lord.
Yeah. And I think I love the baby analogy, because I think that also not only how they interact with themselves, but that tells us something valuable about how God is inviting us to interact with him. I wouldn't necessarily go all the way to like 2 to 4 month old, but I have a 2-year-old, and I try and like sit in the same space with the Lord as my 2-year-old does with me, where he's just like 100% all in, like, mommy, watch me, mommy, watch me, mommy, watch me, like, just wanting me to be so engaged in his life is one thing. How he is just so like unfiltered with me is another thing, where it's just like, my favorite moment the other day, he was like, Mom, you have to walk behind me down the hall. And I started walking like too quickly, and that was not okay. And so he was like, slow down, walk behind me. And then he apparently like stubbed his toe or something like that. And he immediately just like wailed and was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, Robbie, what happened? He was like, oh, actually it's fine. And like, he just like had such a like strong, authentic reaction, but then was able to just self-correct because of sort of the nearness of help should he need it. And I think that that's kind of if he felt like there wasn't somebody close by to help him, I'm pretty confident that would have been like an ER emergency, like on an ongoing basis, because it was such a time when he was so aware that there was what he needed was right there. And so he's just able to be that, kind of at that authentic emotional awareness level with me, even though so often it's irrational and these things like that. And I'm sure you've seen the meme of like the picture from The Office. It's of like Jim Halpert's character from The Office. where he's just staring at the camera. And those of you watching on YouTube will be able to see where he's just that like really look on his face. And there's this meme where it's constantly like, me telling my kids, why do you keep doing something I've told you not to do over and over again? God looking at me like, really? Like, what have you been doing? Is doing what I've told you not to do over and over again. And I think that having that emotional vulnerability with God is something that doesn't alleviate anxiety necessarily. Though I think over time it does diminish it. It is something that makes it weatherable, something that doesn't become like a problem in life. And something that, in another episode, we're trying to chat with a therapist about kind of what is that point where we really do need intervention at another level, because sometimes there really are other issues going on, that this isn't something that is kind of self diagnosable or something you can walk yourself through with prayer. Sometimes the Lord really wants other people to walk with us who have the specific skills to do that. But a lot of times for your kind of pedestrian, non-diagnosable anxiety, this is something that God wants to use to invite us into deeper relationship with him.
Yes, I totally agree. And through our suffering is when we grow in we get to experience the Lord the most intimately, because we are at our weakest, right? We're just like, we're at our weakest. And like I mentioned earlier, we have the two choices. So when we are at our weakest and we choose Jesus, that is when we experience him the most. And that's where I've experienced him the most and experienced the most peace. Another little thing that's helped me is, okay, we know that the Lord knows our feelings. We know that he knows our thoughts. We know he knows every action. That was a lot of words. But he does, but he also takes joy in hearing from us. And so for me, when I'm feeling these emotions, instead of just saying like, Lord, you know how I feel. No, I get nitty gritty with the Lord. I say, Lord, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling like so hard with this. I can't handle it. Please help me. And so telling the Lord, for me, I'm very much of I think through things out loud kind of a person. And so most of the time, like my husband just hears me ramble, but I'm just thinking. But even in prayer of like reminding myself that I need to tell the Lord what I feel and how I feel. And then, it helps me to release some of those emotions and make me feel not alone. And I do have a few other pieces of advice that I want to share from other women. And so you talked about, asking for help. So Catholic counseling, one of my friends from college is like, Catholic counseling is awesome. So don't feel guilty for, asking for help. Like that's okay. We're built for community and built, for relationship with others as well. And so another person said, praying and asking others for guidance. So if you know of someone who struggled with this, like go ask them, or a trusted adult, a roommate, a friend, finding someone, because once you can get those feelings off your chest, most of the time, like we can just breathe, right? Because we internalize so much of it. So I'm going to kind of read through my list. So praying the rosary and or praying 54-day novena. If you're Catholic, that's a great option. Another person said, remembering that there is nothing that our all-powerful Father has not already planned, which I thought was like, mic drop. Staying off your phone. I'm like, that's a good piece of advice. Realizing God has something in store and I need to be patient. Another couple Catholic ones is frequent sacraments, or going to adoration. But even for me, worship music and just keeping Jesus active in my ears all day is huge as well. So, and the last one that I have was another quote from someone, and it's kind of like a little prayer she says to the Lord, and she says, "My sweetest Jesus, I am your servant. Where you lead, I follow. Just make it very clear." And so I thought that was cool. Just so much fun advice that I received, and so I just had to share it with you guys today.
Yeah, I love that. I always pray, especially when there's something that like the general trend has been like, yes, you're supposed to do this. I'm always just like, okay, like, this is where we're driving and you're going to have to like reroute the road if you want it to go somewhere else. Cause I'm doing what we've been planning, you know,
Yep. Yep.
and I don't really have anxiety about that, which I think is, you know, obviously been a journey to get there. But I think that that's something that can be really revolutionary to a lot of women, is the idea that you don't have to necessarily like exhaustively discern every individual decision. You can, you know, really be walking with Jesus over a long time and have that relationship with him where you're like, okay, this has been something you've been leading me to do on a regular basis. And so far, it seems like this is just kind of the open door. And so, unless you say, like, unless you close it on me, I'm going to continue walking that direction. And I think that that's, you know, a decision that I made with my speaking career actually, was to just, you know, it was so clear the timing and how it worked out. And I asked for someone else to be involved in the process so that I wasn't kind of in my own driver's seat. And so there's actually like a woman that he sent me that like more or less kind of runs my speaking career for me, not because I asked her to, but because she felt so prompted to do it. And so because of that and lots of other things, I'm just like, Lord, I'm just going to say yes to every opportunity that I get to speak. And so you need to like send me a feeling, a very specific like interjection if you don't want me to do that, because this has been like a 10-year journey of like getting to the point where you're asking me to speak. And now you've been like, go play, have fun. And that's what I'm going to do until you tell me to do something else. Just like we think about our children, you know, it's not like the rules are different every day. And like, they have to like constantly be like, oh, but is that right today? He just lets us go in a lot of times. And that is also something that can be really freeing on the anxiety front.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think if I have one piece of advice I can give, that would be to just live in your today and not in your tomorrow. That's where I found the most freedom with anxiety, is being able to just focus on this present moment. It's something that the Lord has been teaching me, is just kind of something that I'm like, yeah, that's a good thought. So what is the Lord inviting me to do today that's going to get me to heaven? So just kind of pray with that question of like, what is the Lord inviting me to do today that's going to get me to heaven? And so instead of worrying about tomorrow or what's planned, is okay, you know, for me as a business owner, that's, you know, marketing work. Maybe that's my goal for today, or I have podcasting today, you know, what is it today? And just work on letting go of the future, because you'll be able to experience so much joy and just so much peace. And you'll be able to just experience the Lord even more when we can just invite him into these small little intimate moments. So if you're having coffee in your kitchen, invite him to sit on the chair with you, next to you. And then picture him there with his coffee in his hand, reading the newspaper, hanging out with you. So bring the Lord into your life, into your intimate day-to-day moments, and just letting go of the future. It's so hard. It's a constant process for me, but it truly, I have experienced the Lord so freeing and just so fruitfully with him. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Whitney, so much for being here with me today. It's been so nice chatting with you. If you want to check out what Whitney's up to online, all those links are going to be in our show notes, so you can check her out there, both on Instagram and through her podcast and shop. I hope that you guys have a wonderful Tuesday. Thanks for being with me, Whitney.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for the invitation to be here. It's been such a joy.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. It is always a joy to be with you. I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, whichever place you most prefer, or do it all if that is what floats your boat. We would love to continue to get to know you better and grow in relationship with you. And so I encourage you to check out the links in both our show notes and our YouTube description that tell you more about where you can connect with us elsewhere. The two big things we have going on besides the podcast is our shop that is full of reminders of who you are in God, helping you to really grow in that radical art of standing in who you are and giving gifts that help others to do the same. The other big thing we have going on is the Uprising Academy. This is all of our formation programs, workshops, retreats. Everything is available virtually and on demand, where you can sign up and continue to learn more about radically standing in what God says about you, especially if you are in a place in your life where you are not being fed the way that you long to be fed, whether it's in your community, whether it's at your church, whatever it is, there is more for you, and we can absolutely walk with you into it through the Uprising Academy. All those links are in our show notes, and if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to leave a review. Reviews are the number one way that we help get in front of new faces, new people that are able to be touched by the radical art of standing in what God says about us. I love you. I'm praying for you. I hope you have an amazing week.